Everyone. Once again, you all never cease to amaze me at the lengths you'll go to travel to hear us talk about our great technology. And so it's always good to see and recognize some of our longtime and faithful shareholders. And I know many of you have come a long way to hear us, and so we have a good presentation to give you here in a little bit. For those of you that I have not met and don't know me, I'm Tom Zellabor. I'm the chair of the board of directors for Lightwave Logic, and we welcome you to our new location here. We have been doing this in Boulder for the last several years, and now we're here at the Hilton at Inverness. The reason we're doing that is, as many of you know, we have a brand new facility, and I recommend that every single one of you go see this facility. I think you'll be blown away with how far we've come from the little garage shop to what we are now, and our team of people is just I think second to none. So please take the time to go over there after our presentation. As many of you know, we have two parts of this. One is formal, and the other is informal, which is during the presentation by Michael Lebby, who's our CEO. And when Michael gives his presentation, please let him get through the whole thing, and we'll have time for questions and answers. And at the end of that, I want you to be, please, if you do ask a question, identify yourself so we kind of know who you are if we haven't met you before, and that way we can keep track of things. We're also simulcasting this or webcasting this event, so to all the people that are online, welcome to all of you also. Before we get started, I do want to introduce our board members that are here. First and foremost is Michael Lebby, who is our CEO. So, Michael, please stand up so people know who you are. I'll just kind of go right down the line. We have Ron Bookey. Ron is also the chair of our audit committee. We have Siraj Noor Al-Ahmadi. Siraj has been on the board for a few years now, and an expert in the telecom areas for sure. We have William Pickett, is our longest-standing board member. Bim has been with us since the beginning of 2008, so he probably knows the company as well as anybody. We've got Jim Marcelli. If we had three more hats we could give him, I'd give them to him, but he's our president, our chief operating officer, and now our corporate secretary. All right, we've got Fred Leonberger. Fred has been with us now for a couple of years. Fred before has done a lot of contracting work with us, and he's now part of our operations committee. So, and Dr. Joe Miller, for many of you have met him, was not able to make it to this event, but I know he's listening. All right, let's see here. So the one thing I want to also identify is that since Jim is now our secretary, he will be recording the minutes of this meeting. And then in the back we have David Siddle, and he is the duly appointed representative of Broadridge Financial Solutions Incorporated, and he's been appointed to serve as the inspector of election for this annual meeting. If you could please stand there, Mr. Siddle, so everybody knows who you are. And he signed the oath of office, which will be filed with the minutes of the meeting. So with that, I'll kick into the formal portion of this, and Jim and I will be tag teaming here for a minute or so. And for the formal portion, I will now call on our corporate secretary, Jim Marcelli, to establish that we have met the necessary corporate requirements for this meeting. Jim?
All right. Thank you. We have proof that notice of this meeting has been duly given, and that the notice of the meeting, duly given a notice of the meeting of the shareholders. Proxy statement and proxy were mailed on or about April 13th, 2018 to all shareholders of record at the close of business on April 13th, 2018. The affidavit, together with copies of the notice of proxy statement, will be filed with the minutes of this meeting. As of April 13, 2018, the record date of the meeting, there were 75,104,532 shares outstanding. We have 48,261,229 shares present by person or proxy at this meeting, which is over 33 1/3% of outstanding shares and constitutes a quorum permitting the transaction of business. Each share entitles the holder to one vote on each matter that may come before the meeting. A list of registered shareholders entitled to vote are available for examination by the shareholders.
Thank you, Jim. Since you got me now? There we go. Okay, since there is a quorum present, I will now call the meeting to order. The meeting will proceed as provided for in the agenda that was on all your seats before you sat down. The items to be voted upon are, first, to elect two Class 1 directors to the Board of Directors to serve until the 2021 annual meeting of shareholders or until their successors have been duly elected or appointed and qualified. Two, to ratify the appointment of Morris & Cogan LLP to serve as the company's independent registered public accounting firm for fiscal year ending December 31st, 2018. Three, to hold an advisory vote on the compensation of the named executive officers. Four, to hold an advisory vote on how frequently we should seek an advisory vote on the compensation of the named executive officers. And finally, to consider and take action upon such other business as may be properly come before the annual meeting or any adjournments thereof. Jim, would you please describe the voting procedures?
We will be voting by proxy ballot on the agenda items described in the proxy statement previously sent to you. If you have already turned in a proxy card and you do not intend to change your vote, it is not necessary for you to vote again. However, for those of you who did not turn in a proxy card, or if you wish to change your vote, please get a blank ballot card from Mr. Siddle, our Inspector of Election, and for use for voting for today. If you take a ballot, please make sure you print your name and the number of shares you are voting on the ballot. If you have previously sent in a proxy card and you are changing your vote, please note this on the ballot. The ballot must be signed by the shareholder. After you complete the ballot card, please give to Mr. Siddle as soon as possible, and the results of the voting will be announced at the end of the formal portion of this meeting.
So Mr. Siddle is standing up for any of you that need a form. It's right behind you. Okay, so the first item of business is the election of two Class 1 directors to the Board of Directors to serve until the 2021 annual meeting of shareholders or until their successors have been duly elected and appointed and qualified. The Board of Directors is comprised of 8 directors and is divided into 3 classes, currently comprised of 2 Class 1 directors, whose terms expire today, the 2018 annual meeting, 3 Class 2 directors, all of whose terms will expire at the 2019 annual meeting, and 3 Class 3 directors, all of whose terms will expire at the 2020 annual meeting. The Board of Directors has nominated 2 Class 1 incumbent directors for re-election and recommends a vote for the election of the Class 1 incumbent directors. Our Corporate Secretary will now place the names of the nominees in nomination.
The Board of Directors nominated the following Class 1 directors to serve a term of 3 years or until successors are elected and qualified. Number 1, Siraj Noor Elamante and Frederick J. Leonberger. Applicable federal security laws require that advance notice be given to the Secretary of a shareholder's intent to nominate other persons as directors of the company. No such notice has been received. Accordingly, nominations for directors are now closed. The two nominees for directors receiving the highest number of votes will be elected to the board of directors. The proxies solicited by management will be voted in favor of both directors. I hereby move that Siraj Noor Alamonte and Frederick J. Leonberger be elected as Class 1 directors to serve a term of 3 years or until their successors are elected and qualified.
I second the motion.
The next item of business is the ratification of the appointment of Morris & Cogan LLP as the company's independent registered public accounting firm for 2018. The vote required to ratify the appointment of Morris & Cogan LLP to serve as our independent registered public accounting firm for fiscal year 2018 is the affirmative vote of holders of the majority of the votes cast at the annual meeting, entitled to vote in person or by proxy, and entitled to vote on this matter. The Board of Directors recommends a vote for approval of this matter.
I hereby move that the appointment of Morris & Cogan LLP as the company's independent registered public accounting firm for the year ending 2018 be ratified.
I second the motion.
The next item of business is to hold an advisory vote on the compensation of our named executive officers. This proposal, commonly known as Say on Pay proposal, gives our shareholders the opportunity to express their views on the compensation of the named executive officers. This vote is not intended to address any specific item of compensation, but rather the overall compensation of our named executive officers and the philosophy, policies, and practices prescribed in our proxy statement. The vote required for approval of the compensation of our named executive officers is the affirmative vote of the holders of a majority of the votes cast at the annual meeting, entitled to vote in person or by proxy, and entitled to vote on this matter. The Board of Directors recommends a vote for the approval of the compensation of our named executive officers as disclosed in our proxy statement. I hereby move that the I do that.
I'm moving along.
You're moving along. There you go. I hereby move that the compensation of the company's named executive officers, as disclosed in the proxy statement pursuant to the compensation disclosure rules of the SEC, including the compensation discussion and discussions and analysis, the summary compensation tables, and the related narrative discussion be approved.
I second the motion.
The next item of business is to hold an advisory vote on how frequently we should seek an advisory vote on the compensation of our named executive officers. The purpose of this proposal is to assess shareholder preferences on the frequency of future advisory votes on executive compensations, and as such, there will be no approval or adoption of a resolution establishing the frequency of future advisory votes on executive compensation. The option of 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years that receives the highest number of votes cast by shareholders will be considered the frequency for the advisory vote on the executive compensation that is preferred by our shareholders.
I hereby move that the shareholders vote in favor of one of the following options for holding a stockholders advisory vote on the company's executive compensation either every year, once every 2 years, or once every 3 years.
I second the motion.
There being no other items to be brought before our shareholders for a vote at this meeting, voting is now complete. All ballots must be turned in to Mr. Siddle at this time. The Inspector of Election has tabulated the votes, and Mr. Siddle will now give us the report of the Inspector of Election.
All of the votes have now been counted. Based upon these preliminary results, both Class 1 directors have been elected to serve for a term of 3 years or until their successors have been duly elected and qualified. Morris & Cogan LLP has been duly appointed as the company's independent registered public accounting firm for 2018. The compensation of the named executive officers is approved. The frequency that the company should hold an advisory vote on the compensation of the named executive officers is once every 3 years.
Okay, this concludes the formal part of our annual meeting, and the formal portion of the annual meeting of shareholders is now adjourned. So now we'll go ahead and switch over to our CEO, Michael Lebby, who will provide you a business update. And like I said before, please hold your questions to the end, and when you do ask a question, please identify yourselves. I don't know if we have another hand mic we can give. Well, actually, Michael's on that. So please also wait, and I will hand you the microphone so that the people that are online can hear it. So, Michael, over to you.
Thank you. Are we ready to go with the microphone? Well, it's been a really busy year. It's been a great year. I'm going to show you this in a bunch of slides. Just like last year, for the folks who were here last year, you saw lots of colored slides. They moved very, very fast. It's going to be the same again this year. The first 20 minutes or so, I'm going to go pretty quickly because there's a lot of the tutorial background of the technology that we're working on. And then for the next sort of 30 to 40 minutes, I'm going to get into the technical progress we've made over the last 12 months. And so that'll be a fun part of the talk. So let's make sure this thing works. So we'll get started. Cool. So we have a safe harbor slide, which we have to put up every time we give a public talk. But I'm not going to read the words on this one. I've got a dedication to this slide. I've actually, Pink Floyd is a band that when I was a kid in England, it was a pretty cool band. And from my perspective, rock, improvisation, innovation at its best, but you'll see that theme come through my talk as we go through. So the agenda today, I'm going to give you an introduction, a short tutorial on the technology. We're going to go through some of the environment and markets, some of the photonic integrated circuit applications, some polymer picks and pick platforms. And if you've seen some of my presentations before, you'll see some of these slides I've used before in public presentations at conferences. And then we're going to talk about some of the plans we've got set up for the next 12 months. And I'll close with some notes. As usual in all my slides, the green bar at the bottom, if you can see it at the back, that really summarizes the slide. So if there's too much technical stuff on the slide, just read the thing at the bottom and you'll get it. So let's see, fiber optics. Brief history of fiber optics, been around over 100 years. It was actually discovered when this guy, John Tyndall, and this French guy saw the sunlight going through a bucket of water through a little pipe down into a pail. And they realized the light was actually kept into the pipe and it actually turned the corner. So that was known as internal reflection. So that was actually discovered about 100 years ago. So total internal reflection is really the basic concept that we're looking at fiber optics. So fiber optics comes in little fibers like this. I actually got a little demo one here, just real fast. This is a fiber optic you'd use in a system. This is a single mode fiber optic. We don't make these. These are made by companies like Corning. But this is a piece of glass. So I'm going to show you what that is. You can have a look at that afterwards. And that little picture on the top right, fiber optics is a little thin strand about this big. So this actually this is by a company called Versalume that actually makes fiber optics for entertainment. And this is a little laser in this little box here. And when I plug in the battery, do that, lights up. So now ours is not exactly like this, but this gives you an idea. Fiber optics is a very thin piece of glass. So what we're actually doing is we're making the things at either end of this piece of glass to send signals down. This piece of glass lets light come out and people use it for entertainment, but we're using the one for communications. So we can look at that afterwards. So you can see by the size of that bumblebee wasp thing, it's not actually that big. But this is how the internet is actually set up today. That's lots of glass everywhere. And it's been around commercial fiber optics since 1980. And you can see the size of it, just like I just showed you. It's about the size of a human hair. It's not that thick. So I was showing here 60, 65 microns is the hair. That's the size of the fiber, 125 microns. Slightly bigger. And this was a slide from AT&T back in the 1970s. This is a big copper cable, and there's your little fiber optic cable. And this is what we use to use the internet today. And, you know, we connect all across the country using glass, using fiber optics, as you can see here. The whole country is wired with glass fiber. In fact, it's not only across the land, it's across the sea too. You can see these purple lines show you the undersea cables that take fiber optics under the sea from New York to London, from San Francisco to Tokyo. And so you can see the whole world is getting wired up by fiber. And in fact, when we go and we say we want things on the cloud, it's not really the cloud at all. I don't know who coined the term the cloud. Maybe it was Apple, I'm not sure. But actually, data is really sent via the ground or under the sea. And if you look at the number of data that is sent in terms of traffic, most of the data, more than 95% of the data, is actually not in the cloud at all. I think the cloud is like the satellites, it's less than 2 or 3%. So really, when we say we send stuff to the cloud, we're really sending it in the ground or we send it under the ocean. And here's some just photographs. This is a Verizon chart that's on their website showing their network that shows it's mostly on the land and mostly under the sea. And you can see orange cables like this, which is typically of where you see people plumbing fiber optics in the roads, under the roads, that connect all the houses. This is what you see in big data center type situations with racks. You see the fiber optic cables here. Fiber optic applications, it's the least expensive, most reliable method for high-speed, long-distance communications. So we already transmit signals across the world, 100 gigabits per second. We really only started to use the bandwidth of fiber optics. So the next question one may ask is if you send light in this piece of glass, how does it stay in the glass? How does it not disperse and go everywhere? Well, this is a slide I showed last year, and I'll show it again because it's really cool. I'm actually a swimmer, and if you get into a swimming pool and you sit at the bottom of the swimming pool and you look up, then you will see the lights, or you'll see the sky, you'll see the water moving. That's pretty much here. And so the light actually escapes the water. If you look down the swimming pool, what do you see? You see the reflection of those black lines on the surface of the water. That's internal reflection. So that's this guy. That's the light bouncing off the surface there and going back down again. That's what it's all about. So you can just do a simple experiment, and you can see for yourself how light gets trapped in the glass and it can get sent across the world. And if you look at a turtle, I used this last year, I like this one, you can see the reflection of the turtle in the surface of the water. So that's pretty cool. But what actually happens in an optical fiber is that you have a core, a cladding, and then you have a protective coating, and the light actually goes in the center in the core, and it gets bounced in the core, and it goes all the way through the fiber using internal reflection. And that is the theory, if you like, of how light can keep in these fibers that can go from London to New York or San Francisco to Tokyo. And there's different types of optical fiber. There's different types of multimode step index, multimode gradient index. But the one that we are designing our products for is the single mode, which is the one that's colored yellow here. So this is single mode fiber. This is the electromagnetic spectrum. As you can see, there's a little part of this electromagnetic spectrum where the eye is visible. So these are the colors of the eye, the range of the human eye from here to here. You can see cats can see a little bit into the ultraviolet. You see snakes can see a little bit into the infrared. So that's really where the animals go. But the wavelengths we're using for fiber optics are these guys here. You can also see on this spectrum, you can see radio, radar, broadcast band, but the area that we're focused in on for fiber optics to send signals around the world is 1310 and 1550. So that just gives you an idea of where we are. So in terms of optoelectronics, optoelectronics is a word. It's opto and it's electronics. Well, electronics, this is the classic Intel microprocessor electronic chips. Optics is to do with light or photons. And optoelectronics is a combination of the two. So you use electronics to actually get light to do things, either to emit light or to detect light or to manipulate light. Today, folks, you also use the word photonics. Photonics is a word that's very popular today that means a combination of optics and electronics. So optoelectronics is now called photonics today. When I did my PhD, it was all in optoelectronics. Nobody even used the word photonics, but today it's all switched around. So genetic technology that you might see, this is what a traditional laser may look like in a butterfly package. This is what a photodetector may look like. That receives the light, that sends the light, that receives the light. You stop at a traffic light, you'll see green LEDs. You might see a blue LED if you crack open a DVD player, a Blu-ray player. This is what a silicon solar cell looks like, and this is what fiber that you buy from Corning looks like in a big spool. So these are typical optoelectronic devices you'd see. When you go down to the chip level, you can see this is what a modulator will look like, and this is the type of style of modulator that we're designing. A laser will look like this in semiconductor and indium phosphide, with this sort of showing where the light comes out. This is an L amplifier. This is what a detector will look like. So these are typical chip-type devices that you'll see in the business. But the real question is how does a modulator operate? Because Lightwave is in the business of making modulators, and we're in the business of making polymer modulators. And so, why would you need a modulator in the first place, one might ask, right? Because you've got a laser sending light out. Well, you've got the laser at the top left-hand corner here, and if you're going at a fairly slow speed, less than 10 gigabits per second, it's actually pretty good. You can actually put a bias, electrical signal on a laser, and you can switch it on and off. So that top part of the signal is a 1, that's on. That's off, that's a 0. So you can do the 1s and 0s pretty easily by just having electrical control. But if you turn up the speed of the laser and you want to go a little bit faster, then what happens to the signal is the extinction ratio, the quality of that output starts degrading. Instead of getting a real 1, you get a sort of nearly 1 and a sort of nearly 0. And so the extinction ratio drops, and then it's much more difficult to determine which is a 1 and which is a 0. If you turn that speed up even more, greater than 20 gigabits per second, you put the pedal to the metal, and you get this sort of effect. It doesn't really work too well. And so some of the things we're doing, as you're already aware, 25 gigs and 50 gigs, how do you make that work? Well, in order to get that to work well, you put a modulator in front of the laser. And a modulator switches very fast and chops the signal. So the laser's putting out a signal. So in terms of the laser here, you slow him all the way down, you put a CW signal in, and then you have the modulator doing the action like that. And so then you can get your nice 1s and 0s. And in fact, if you're really smart, you can put them on the same chip, and you now call it an integrated laser modulator. So we're heading where this red box is, we're an integrated laser modulator. You put a modulator, a bit like a windscreen wiper, right in front of the laser. You get a nice, very high-speed signal, greater than 20 gigabits per second. And that's the reason people need to use modulators today. So next slide. So if you dig a little bit deeper into this, I tried to think about what's the best way to explain this. Well, if you have a flashlight, and I think the folks in the back can see this little flashlight here, and you have this cog wheel, and the cog wheel is going around, and it blocks the light, and then it doesn't block the light, so you get this sort of dotted beam afterwards. That's sort of how it works. It's just like a chopper. It's a very simple concept, and that's really all we're doing. So we're making these guys here, that green box. That's the modulator. That's what we're doing, and we're making them out of polymers. So, and what they look like in the chip, just like I showed earlier, this is a Mark Zender layout, so this is how we do this. So this is a conceptual drawing. This is what, if you're an electronic engineer, this is showing you the 1s and 0s of the data going in, and the 1s and 0s of the data coming out, driven by the laser here. So this is typically the scenario you'd see how you'd wire them all up from a block diagram standpoint, but they're critical for high-speed communications. You want to do high-speed communications today, you really have to have modulators in front of lasers. Woo, this is going crazy. Let's go back. I'm moving forward, let's go back. So this is where we were. And so some of the different waveguide geometries you can use in order to make this technology work. Our modulator design is a ridge waveguide design, which is this guy. And we use a Mark Zender design. But you can see there's other designs that could be used too. So it depends on the design of how you want to design your modulators. There's different ways you can do this. This is passive waveguide architectures. It's ideal for polymers. In fact, I showed this slide last year. It's a conceptual slide, but it's an important slide. One of the key things here is when you have light going through any system, the last thing you want to do is lose it. And so the coupling from the light in and out of the waveguide here is important, as well as if you have an LED or a laser going into some type of waveguide. The loss of light in these areas is where the engineering really is critical. This is where companies have their trade secrets. This is where companies really design their own solutions, and they don't really tell anybody. This is where you have your competitive advantage over other folks, if you can do really good optical coupling. So what's a PIC? It's a photonics integrated circuit. You've seen it in our press releases. We use it a lot. And so basically what it is you're actually squeezing a lot of different functions on the same chip. So what I've showed conceptually here is this PIC here. I mean, it could have some gratings here. It could have some filters. It could have a modulator. It could have a laser. And they're all packaged together in one box. Why is this important? It's because a lot of the customers today want smaller boxes for their solutions. And so we have to figure out ways how to integrate things on the same chip. So we have to miniaturize things. In fact, in my last job, actually I think it was 2 jobs ago, this was one-chip photonics. We did indium phosphide photonic integrated circuits. This one here is a 4-channel 25G transmitter that was done in 2012, indium phosphide. You can see the 4 lasers here. This is a 100G receiver, and you can see all the waveguide tracks. And so these types of chips contain many devices. This is indium phosphide. What we're working on today is polymers. Polymers we know can go a lot faster. So addressing one of these issues, once you have these chips, you've got to put them in a package. Now these are different programs that I've seen, public programs, that did PIC packaging. This is not our packaging. This is what's out there. And you can see the chip, and you can see the big package around it. So that people have done different ways. This is a connectorized package to fiber. This is a package of a PIC chip to one fiber here with lots of leads. This one here is a big PIC chip, lots of wire bonds. And so PICs contain many devices, have lots of wire bonds, and as you can see here, are quite complex. So one of the challenges that the industry has is how do you actually bring the cost down in these types of packages? How do you make them competitive in terms of cost and performance? And, one example, Infinera is a very large public company doing indium phosphide PIC chips. You just take a look at their package. It's hugely complex. It's really, really expensive. It has over 1,000 wire bonds. I mean, it gets the job done for what they need, but if you're going to go into the data center environment, this is way too expensive. I mean, it's so, this is one extreme of super high performance. So taking a quick look at the environment, this just shows you that, here's that word, cloud access. Everybody talks about going to the cloud. And so we're moving to this, future user-centric type environment where we have lots of consumer devices like smartphones and things. But the bottom line, as you can see here, our lifestyle evolves through heavy use of data and traffic. And so it's our smartphones, it's our YouTubes, our videos that we're using on all these phones that's driving the traffic that's causing all these data centers to crop up all over the world. So, and whenever you look at the market data, it doesn't matter what metrics you look at. All the metrics are pretty good right now. We all know ourselves that we're using a lot more video, we're using a lot more smartphones. So the cloud traffic is going up, the content is going up. If I just look at my kids and my wife with a TV on the laptop, they don't even use the TV anymore. So the whole lifestyle is changing by using lots of traffic. But the metrics are all really good. In fact, this graph I showed last year, this shows you the internet protocol traffic, the IP traffic. It shows you 2015 to 2020. This big blue box says internet video is most of it. If you look down at this graph down here, mobile video is this one. It's in this metric called exabytes per month. Exabytes per month is a huge number. And if we go through what that number means, when we had the old telephone, it was a kilobit per second. That's 10 to the 3, that's 1,000. And then if you have your home internet, that's 1 megabit or 10 megabits per second. That's 1 million bits per second. And you can go through this list. And, the traffic today, EXA is 1 with 18 zeros after it. That's how big a number it is. And folks are actually, I was at a conference just 2 months ago, they're talking about zettabytes, 10 to 21. And, this is what a yottabyte looks like. That's 1 with 24 zeros. That's an awful lot of traffic. So that's an awful lot of data that gets sent backwards and forwards. So that's growing. If you talk to the Googles and the Facebooks and the Amazons, and these are the guys that design the big data centers, their data centers look like this today. I mean, I'm not an architecture of a data center facility, but they talk about legacy multi-tiers, east-west traffic going through their system. They're looking at changing their architectures, changing their spine and leaf so that they can go north-south as well as east-west. And then, all the big companies are trying to figure out how to do this. So the next generation data centers, these big buildings you see everywhere, are going to have architectures that look like this. And they've got, hundreds of people designing these things. But in order to get these types of architectures, they've got to be able to connect their systems using fiber optics at really high speed. And that's where we come in. And so if you look at computing trends, I put this chart in because this shows you the number of transistors on a microprocessor. You can see this is sort of an Intel sort of curve, with a Pentium and a Pentium 4, and people are expecting it to follow to some degree Moore's law. But look at some of the other metrics. Look at clock speed. Look at the cores. Look at the power. They're all hidden plateaus. And so even in the electronics world, some innovation is needed to try and help this industry move forward. And one of the big issues that the chips have is getting data on and off the chips. And this is where we come into play. Communications. So we all know about TVs and smartphones and PDAs, and we all send fiber optics across the country. So optical fiber connects many consumer components. I like this slide because it's from London in the 1960s, and this is what an old mechanical switch rack used to look like. And, that's probably a few tens of kilobits per second for the whole facility. And then you sort of fast forward to today. That was all telephone exchanges. You look at the inside of a Google data center, they're the size of power stations. And they're cropping up all over the place. And, it's Google's sort of leading the trend today. It's going to be ubiquitous tomorrow. And if you look at this map I just saw, this is major content provider data centers around the world. It's the big five. For those at the back, it's Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft. You can see they're spreading all over the world. It's not just the U.S. It's not just Europe. It's Asia. It's South America. It's not in Africa yet, but I expect to see that soon. So this is where the data centers are cropping up everywhere. And this is what this is a rack inside a data center. And the area that we are interested in is what is known as a faceplate. And these faceplates, these are sort of basically trays. And these black areas are areas where you plug in the fiber optics. And one of the things you can see here, just by looking in, what do you have, like 10 or 15 trays? And you can only fit so many fiber optics in the front panel. And that is a problem. And this is a problem that the whole industry has. And so even if you speed up the fiber optics, you only have a limited amount of room because that form factor is not changing. So that's a problem that the industry is trying to deal with. Faceplates is a big issue. In fact, you can see here how they're connected together. See this yellow fiber? That's the yellow fiber here. That's a single mode fiber. That does sort of long reaches, 500 meters to about 2 or 5 kilometers. The orange fiber, which is the multi-mode, is the one that folks used for typically 3 meters to about 300 meters. And so this is how it connects these racks together. You can see some of those yellow fibers in this rack here. You can see the yellow ones all clustered in really tightly there. The next slide shows you that what's actually happening is as companies like us really innovate the technology in single mode, you're seeing a lot of the single mode solutions move into areas where there's shorter links, where there's higher volume. And this is the area that's really attractive. If you can there's lots more shorter links. And so if you can get single mode technology working at high speed into some of these shorter distances, and you get huge volumes in the data centers. This is what's really attracting us. In fact, if you look at this graph here, this is sort of data rate on the vertical versus distance. And so the sweet spot for us in terms of polymer photonics, polymer modulators, it's sort of like 500 meters to about 5 kilometers using single-mode fiber. This is perfect for our technology. And we're seeing a trend of this yellow area moving to the left, moving into this region where it's multi-mode, and that's going to be into the yellow area with single-mode fiber. So that's a good opportunity for us. In fact, this is a slide from Facebook. It's a very complicated slide. I'm not even going to try to explain it. But you can see in Facebook's architecture, they've got optical connections going every which way. And every which way means an optical fiber and a modulator. In fact, a modulator at each end. So the fact that they've got compact solutions is great for us. The other thing from what Facebook is telling us is they want some super high speeds, 400G. They've got 1T, which is 1 terabyte, which is 1000G. So they're looking at super high speeds to send across their system. And I think we've listed the title of this slide, but this is a table from Google. It's the latest one I could find is 2015 in the public domain. And this is just showing you how many servers back in 2015 they were trying to connect in one block. So you're seeing huge numbers of servers being connected together. And if you look at that really closely, you'll see numbers like 10T and 200T and 1.3P, which is a petabyte. So that's 1,300 terabytes. So you're seeing some huge numbers of optical internets. So in terms of global markets, I showed these last year. These haven't changed. It's basically just to remind everybody this is a big opportunity for PIC-based technologies. You can see these are big markets. In terms of optical components that are integrated, it looks like by 2025 we're getting a nice steady increase in business. This doesn't look like it's going to change. PIC technology is going to become de facto in the next 5 to 10 years. And in fact, if you look at it in terms of the boxes they go in, they're called transceiver boxes. That's also climbing pretty nicely too. So we're in a market that's growing steadily. It's not going super fast, but these are big numbers too. So we're seeing nice steady growth in the business, driven by traffic, driven by smartphones, driven by folks like my kids using YouTube every day. And you can see a trend here. Historically, if you go back to 2012, this red line is discrete transceivers. This is a box, a fiber optic box, with individual components in, an individual laser, an individual modulator, an individual detector. What's going to happen is that's going to really plateau, but this blue line, that's basically integrated photonics, where you're going to get more than one device on a chip. It's more miniaturized, so the box is going to be smaller. So you're going to see that happening. And that sort of, that trend is going to accelerate pretty quickly over the next 10 years. Data centers, if you look into the data center and you talk to the engineers, these are their headaches. They got huge data centers now. They need to go longer reaches in the fiber. They're going really fast. They want to go super fast. They want to have denser faceplates, so they can have smaller, more integrated solutions. They're really worried about power. They actually position these data centers right next to power stations because they take a few percent of the national grid now. And, of course, they don't want to pay a lot of money, so they want to have a low dollar per gigabit. Scalable platforms is what they're looking for. They're looking for technologies that can scale to meet some of these headaches. And we're sitting on a technology called polymer photonics, and it's scalable, and it's really exciting, and this is why I'm here. And, single mode fiber growth, that's the yellow fiber. It's dropped off somewhere. Here it is. That's this guy here. This is the multi-mode. It only goes about 200 meters. It's not long enough for data centers these days. Everybody's looking at these types of fiber solutions, especially as you go up to speeds like 400 gigabits per second. And if you look at some of the published trends, this is this is the standards in the business, and this shows you the next major battle is going to be at 400G. So in order to get 400G, you've got to be able to do 50 gig speed, and you've got to multiplex that up. So 50G times 8 is one way to do that. And then right after that, If you, at the last conference, folks were talking about architectures of data centers needing 800G. So that's pretty fast. And the reason why I'm excited is polymers can get there. Now, we're not there yet, but I know they can get there. In fact, they're even designing transceiver boxes. This is what they look like. It's called the OSFP. And the standards are already working on 400 and 800 solutions. So folks are aware of what's coming next, but they don't have a good technology solution. But in order to get to that solution, polymer photonics can enable that integration. Standard packaging on the left here, you need to have integrated packaging on the right. You need to have some flip chip solutions. You need to have some integrated optics. You need to look at things like chip on board. You've got to be innovative in your package design. And these are the areas that we've been filing patents on over the last year. The faceplates, I said these faceplates get stuffed with fibers. There's a close-up here. You stuff these fibers in, but you can only stuff so many in because the fibers have a certain size. So, and if you look at this, this is a standard faceplate. I calculated the amount of data that goes through this faceplate. It's about 600 gigs, which is 0.6 terabits per second. So what does that really mean? Well, today's designs, folks are really moving towards an order of magnitude bigger, 20 to 30 terabits per second. If you talk to the customers, you go into the data center guys, they want 50 to 100. If you can integrate things well, you may be able to do 200. And so where we are in the technology today, in any company around the world, they can't do what the customers want. And so this is a big challenge for anybody to solve. And the customer's saying, give us a solution. Tell us how to do this. And you can see there's some constraints here. My belief is the way to do this is integrate more functions on a chip so you have more miniaturized and you can get more speed, more data going through that front plate. And that's where a lot of folks are thinking. We have a technology, we think we can do that. And so this is a graph by Google. It's a very complicated graph, so I'm going to simplify it. There's a gap appearing. And so the challenge is bandwidth density. What bandwidth density is essentially the amount of data you're getting through that faceplate. If you can't get data through that faceplate, you're challenged. And this black line says they're challenged. There's a gap appearing. They don't know how to solve it. Even with an 800 gigabit optical SFP transceiver, they still have a problem. It doesn't meet the customer's needs. And so this was a paper put out by the folks at Google last year. It's a real issue. They don't know how to solve it. And in fact, further in that paper, they're talking about they've really got, and this is energy per bit, they're talking about whatever solution they use, they've got to get the energy down. They've got to get the power consumption down, less heat. Well, we're sitting on a technology, there's a very low voltage that doesn't produce any heat. So we are a fantastic technology. The trick is can we make that fit into this graph here? Thermal management is critical to address. So we're aware of that. So today's pick options, well, most folks have heard that indium phosphide is where a lot of the technology is today that's already out there in datacom systems. Some folks here, if you're really astute in the technology, probably heard of silicon photonics. But we're doing polymer photonics. We think this enables and integrates with both indium phosphide and silicon, because if you think about it, we're putting down a polymer layers, we're spinning on polymers onto a platform. We can spin it onto silicon, we can spin it onto indium phosphide. So that's an interesting thought. We have our own platform, but potentially we could help these guys too. And so if you look at this from a chart that shows indium phosphide on the left, it can do lasers and things, and silicon photonics on the right can do everything other than a laser, because you can't get light out of silicon. We're actually nicely poised in the middle. We can do lots of really cool things in photonics, and we can add a lot of value here, especially high-speed modulators. So a couple of slides on a roadmap, because I'm trying to get world exposure for polymers across the world. I think folks have seen, I've participated in roadmap workshops. But one of the things here is this is an interesting slide. This is, if any of you are mathematicians, you'll realize it's the same data, but this is a linear graph, a linear scale on the left here, and this is a log scale. And on a linear scale, you can see that 10, 20, 30, 40. This is what the customer wants, which is this orange line, and this is sort of where Ethernet is today in dollars per gigabit, which is a metric. And you can't really tell what's going on. But if you put it on a log scale, 1, 10, 100, you can see there's sort of a gap between what the customer wants, what's what they want to pay for the technology in terms of performance, and where technologies are today and where they're expected to be in the next decade. And you can see there's a bit of a difference. The customers don't want to pay that much. And so there's some innovation needed to keep the customers happy. This is why the customers are open to new technologies right now. In fact, we think we're going to be on this type of path. We're on a technology path where we can provide performance at the right cost. We don't have to sell it super cheap, but we can provide the right cost structure that these guys are looking for, especially compared to other technologies. And that's what I mean by scalability. We can scale in terms of increased performance and keep our costs under control. So this is really, I don't want anybody to read this slide, but this is like a sample roadmap slide that I'm going to Holland this June for the roadmap meeting. And the whole goal of doing the roadmap work in photonics is to make sure that polymer photonics is included in the roadmap so all the customers can see that polymer photonics is a solution that they can potentially buy. So not only are we working a technology solution from the Colorado perspective, we have to work it from, if the customer's looking for new solutions, they're going to look at the roadmaps and say, oh yeah, well we haven't, what's this polymer photonics? Maybe we should try this. And so it's another way of getting huge exposure to our technology. PIC applications, I think some people may have seen this slide before. It just shows you we're doing fiber optic communications today, but there's other applications that could really utilize this type of technology, high-speed modulation. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about other applications because let's nail this one first. We're getting really close. Polymer photonic PICs. So new markets, new applications. The customers are not only telecom these days. So we've all heard of lithium niobate modulators that are going into telecom. But when I look at the marketplace, I don't just see telecom. I see datacom, and I see data centers. I see high-performance computing, things like IBM does. I see short-distance interconnects for heavy data. I also see some of these non-communication opportunities as well. But let's take a step at a time. We're focused on this area, and we really want to make sure we can nail this because there's huge volumes here from the data center environment. In fact, I call this a blue moon event. What's a blue moon event is when I get 2 full moons in a month. But really, this is a rare event in the tech world. It's rare that customers are open to new technologies. They don't often are open to new technologies. They like their incumbent technologies, and as long as their incumbent technologies are working just fine, they're happy. It just so happens that because we're using all the smartphones, because we're using all the video and the traffic, that they need to upgrade their performance. And now they're looking for more cost-effective, high-performance solutions. In fact, you talk to some of these data center guys, after 3 years, they're throwing all the equipment away, they put the new equipment in. The old telephone Marvell, they wanted equipment to last 20 years, reliability. They wanted it to go up to 130 degrees, so they could take it outside, so you have to do all this temperature stuff. You don't need that anymore. Because we're in these big air-conditioned buildings like power center, old power buildings, less than 100 degrees is totally fine. So the temperature requirements are a little different than they were 20 years ago. 3-year lifetimes, less than 100 degrees. They want really small boxes, miniaturization. They want low power. And, of course, they want super high speed. It's not often customers will turn around and say, tell us what you have. Impress us. And we have that situation right now. And this is why we're excited, because we need to jump right now. And I don't know how long it's going to last, but this is the situation. And in fact, from my standpoint, the goalposts have moved. The specifications in Datacom align really nicely with the PKM series that we've been developing for the last decade. It's sort of, maybe it's fortuitous, but this is a market matched to our temperature-stable polymers. And so this is ideal for us. In fact, I think you may have seen this slide before. Our perkinamine polymers that we've been developing, we have great thermal stability. There's a whole bunch of nice things about the polymers. The takeaway from this slide is that it's ideal market positioning and timing because the customers are open to new technology. And in fact, some of the work that we did, a year ago, we had nice 4,000-hour lifetimes. We've got a lot of modeling going on in our technology. We're continuing to improve it. And as you can see, we're now using it into high-speed modulators. So we have stable, reliable polymer materials. And so now let's look at the progress. I think everybody wants to know, how far have we got in the last 12 months? Well, we showed this before. This is the ridge waveguide modulator we showed last year. That hasn't changed. Ridge waveguide, inverted ridge waveguide. You see 3 layers of polymers on a silicon substrate, a cladding, a core, and upper cladding. This hasn't changed. The modulator hasn't changed. That's kept exactly the same, just like the slide I showed earlier today. We have evolved our MOSFETs in how we make our devices. So a year ago, we had chips for test. Then we had chips that are designed for packaging. And now we've designed new MOSFETs for chips for ease of fabrication. So we've even advanced and matured our MOSFETs in our fab in how we make our chips to more fabrication-friendly designs. So last year, I was really excited. I showed you some data. And I showed you that we actually got a modulator to work at 10 gigahertz. I was like, wow, this is really cool, right? And so that was a big deal a year ago. In fact, I think also last year I showed this slide that we actually got greater than 10 gigabits capability. And so, when was it, May last year, 12 months ago? This was the data we were showing. And we actually showed a modulator operating, but it was operating at 10 gigabits per second. In fact, we did show this slide, which shows the layout of the modulator, and we realized pretty quickly that once we got the modulator to work, we actually took us to about 25 gigs. But then we realized we really couldn't package it. We didn't design the modulator to be packaged because the focus was getting the modulator to work. So we got the modulator to work. It worked a lot faster than we thought. We took it up to 25 gigs, and we realized, we need some more space here. We need to redesign it to get some wire bonding to go in. And so that's what we've been working on. And in fact, last year, we even pushed the performance to get to 28. So I think there was a press release on this that we put out. I don't remember when it was. But this was exciting. This was really good news. We actually had the modulator design. We optimized it. We took it up to 28. And then we realized, now we need to put it in a package. And you need to put it in a package before a customer can actually test it. So we went back to the drawing board. In fact, before we did that, this is the graph we showed. This was the simulated modulator frequency response. So this is a modeling simulation. So this is not real data. This is how we expected the performance to be of the modulators. And we thought if with the right type of designs, we could get to 20 gigabits last year. And so I gave 2 tick marks because we did the 10 and we did the 20. We did the red line and we did the blue line. We talked about the 50 gig line last year. But I think if everybody remembers, it's like, wow, that's way off in the distance. That was a year ago. And because I said last year, that's going to take us some microwave engineering. We need some skills to do that. That's not going to be easy. So this is where we were last year. So this year, as you can see, we changed the design a little bit. We have bigger pads here so we can do wire bonding. This took us to 50 gigs, and it was packageable. And so we did the design for 50. And we got some really nice performance. The first thing we did is before we put optical signals in, we did some electrical modeling, electrical RF design. We got some really nice results here. We got operation here, low frequency response. We started making some chips, and we actually got to 50 gig capability. I think everybody saw that press release. And then the next challenge is put that chip in a package. So we got the chip working at 50, and then we needed to put it into the package. And so this is sort of what so those folks are going to go on the tours. This is sort of what you're going to see. You're going to see some of the setup today that we did in terms of doing the measurements. But, the takeaway from this slide is that the RF design, the radio frequency design, was absolutely critical. It's not linear when you go from 1 to 10 or 10 to 25. To go from 25 to 50 was a huge leap because things change when you go higher in frequency. Everything becomes an antenna. Everything becomes an aerial. So you get signals leak all over the place. So it takes really careful design. And in fact, I think I showed some of these pictures at the conference in Brussels in March. This is our package modulator. You can see here we've got the chip here. We've got a lens going to the fiber. You see the fibers connected here. In fact, one investor wrote to me and said, "Hey, is that label photoshopped?" And I said, "Yeah, it's photoshopped because we didn't have the stickers. They didn't come in. But the stickers have come in. So what was I going to do? So here's one of